Hi, and welcome to today's professional development session with our FACE program here at Common Sense Media. I'm really happy to see you all here and have you today along with Jamie, who's going to be helping me present on those underlying issues with social media. We're going to review some research as well on both the positive and negative impacts of social media, and we're going to explore some strategies for addressing these challenges and engaging families to support students. I'm Vicki. I help lead the FACE program along with my colleague Jasmine, and we are so happy to have Jamie here today. He's from our education team. I'll let Jamie introduce himself.
Vicki, Saylor, happy day to be alive here. Happy Wednesday, you all. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jamie Nuñez, as Vicki pointed out. I oversee the western half of the United States in adopting and thinking about issues like social media and best ways you can take resources both to families as well as your school leaders.
Thank you, Jamie. And he has some other professional development sessions on our education site. So if you are interested in learning more about digital citizenship, you can visit our education page and look under events. And there's also other trainings on our YouTube channel. So take a look. He's a dynamic presenter, and I hope you enjoy today as much as I know I will presenting with him. So we're going to keep going because we do have an hour. So we want to get through everything. We also want to give you time to react and reflect and also do a couple of activities with us. But today what we're going to cover is we're going to cover that new research, unpacking how social media impacts teens' mental health. We're also going to review and just learn about some of those underlying social media issues, and then again, strategies to support students and families with safe social media use. Before we begin, I just want us to think about this this is going to be our guiding question. How do we use social media and why is it so important on thinking about how we use it? Well, our well-being is influenced by the relationship that we have with and through technology. So the habits that we create, those are really important as we begin to think about what is the foundation of our type of use. We have to be thoughtful about it, because every time we use social media or any type of technology or media, it can have a great impact, not only on our mental health, but it can also affect us physically, socially, and emotionally. So I just want you to keep that as kind of like our guiding principle for today. And as members of our FACE program, we have these 4 guiding principles, again, of how we structure our program. And we follow these principles based on Dr. Karen Mapp's her strategy. And she talks about how when we engage families, we should think about different ways in which we think about this engagement. So the first one is to reflect, and we want to create those welcoming spaces to respect, honor, and embrace the diversity of families in your classroom and community. And ways we can do that is by sharing our resources. And you all have access to that toolkit. So when you're thinking about ways to reflect, use that toolkit to find those resources that you think would best resonate with your communities. All of your communities, they may be different. So really get to know your communities. You can give them surveys, get to know them before you share those resources, so that what you share with them is really relatable and that they'll get the most out of the resources that you share. The second one is connect, and that's really important. We want to build that mutual trust and communicate effectively to build that relationship. And we want our parents to feel as partners with us. We don't want them to just sit back and be passive about this. We know that this is a shared learning and responsibility, and we couldn't do this without our parents. Again, being, very active in your communication with them, finding out the best ways to communicate with them, and keeping that communication relevant and regular is really important. And then collaboration is super important as well. We want to construct learning opportunities with them. Again, get their feedback on what they want to learn, on how they want to learn. We want to do this so that we value their knowledge as well as teaching partners with us for their kids, not only their cognitive and emotional development, but as well as their physical and social development as well. We have those presentation slides. So if you are hosting your workshop, we have those base decks available for you where you can use them as is, or you can combine a few. We also encourage you to send those family activities and family tech planners home when you're beginning these conversations. But again, look through our toolkit and find what you think would resonate the best with your community. And then, of course, leading alongside families. We don't only want to learn with them, but we want to continue to learn ourselves. So thank you for being here today. Professional development is really important for us as educators and family engagement specialists to continue staying up to date on the latest and greatest research or strategies that we can then share with our families. So today I'm going to hand it over to Jamie, and he's going to lead you through this reflection. Go ahead, Jamie.
Thanks, Vicki. And I really appreciate and I admire your model. I think it's a wonderful way that folks on the call can model after or replicate in their own districts or their own sort of education setting. I want to start with one of the aspects that I think is really, really helpful, and that is our ability to both empathize and connect with our families. And so I think I'll start by modeling that for everyone on the call today, which is to what extent do you believe that social media has been helpful or harmful to your families? If you want to include anything on the chat, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What comes up for you as you think about social media as a benefit or as a hindrance for your families? And I guess I'll ask you, Vicki, because you're a family member, what has been, or you've been a parent, has social media been really helpful in your family, or has it been a detriment?
Well, I think a little of both. And I think when my kids were younger, when they were in middle school and high school and starting to use it, I think that's when I saw most of the harmful effects. Now that they're adults, they've been able to manage it a little better. But even as adults, sometimes it can get a little unmanageable. Sometimes you'll see things that make you feel bad. I mean, even as an adult, if you're left out of something or you're missing somebody, let's say your family gets together for Thanksgiving and you see them together and you can't be there, you might feel a little sad. So, I mean, that can affect my mental health because I live very far away from my family. But overall, I think it has been a positive experience for us because we're able to keep in touch with others. We're able to find people who have maybe similar interests as we do, or if we want to learn something new or belong to a group that has the same types of interests, or if we want to learn something, I think it's available for us. But it's really important to learn how to use it and learn how to use it in balance. So it does take effort. It's not a free for all. And I think that's something that we try to keep in mind because, I think it can be a little bit of both. What about you, Jamie?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I want to point out a few things that are what I've really found really helpful in some of the things that you've shared. And that is both the opportunity for families to share their thoughts around social media use. You pointed out to the idea that we need to support and educate our families around those benefits and those challenges. And I think, in my own case, it's when I work with schools, I think a question like this, a survey question, an opportunity for you and your families to connect about an issue is really helpful. Oftentimes when I see school leaders or parent liaisons talk about social media use, there's often an assumption being made about what a child is being exposed to. And I just encourage everyone on the call to really rethink and reframe that conversation. Can you move on to the next slide just so we can get into what that is? And I will answer your question around social media, but my child is not old enough to be on social media. And when she is, I will likely move to a corner of the world that she doesn't have any internet access. So no, I'm just playing that. That's my personal bias here around that. Let's start to think about then what research tells us. What are some of the trends that we're seeing? And this is a really great way as we share the next few slides to share with your families about not only the trends that are happening on social media, but the impact it's having on students' overall well-being. So I want to point to three very different pieces of research that we've covered over the last year and a half that might share and give us some insight into what our teens are thinking about or when our young adults are thinking about when it relates to social media. Next, you. The first is there in our constant companion research is really, and again, we won't go through the abundance of insights that we share in our research. We'll just give you some tidbits here. But the first is probably the most important, which is our teens want us to know that smartphone design actually affects their overall well-being. That focus is very real for them. That level of distraction that you'll see both on the research as well as the impact it actually has on the child's school day, in addition to their sleep, in addition to their social life, it's very real. And so what you need to know is that that level of distraction for our kids can often prevent them from doing other things that might benefit their overall well-being. Let me give you a few examples. You might go into the next slide. On any given day, according to our slides, our kids will pick up their phone about 51 times a day. Now, this is not that we've seen numbers much higher than that. We saw numbers very much lower than that in our research, but it's important to know that impulsivity, that our kids, when they have their devices in front of them, while not on social media, that urge to pick up their device is very real for them. Move on to the next slide. During the school day, and again, this has been very controversial over the last year, at least here in the state of California, but our kids are picking up their phone, or according to the research, about 43 minutes during the school day. And so that might not sound like a lot, but again, the idea for our kids wanting to connect with others, wanting to connect with their device, prevents them from those learning opportunities, might prevent them from socializing in a way that might be healthy in your space. And so it's really important to kind of note that. I don't know if you want to react to either of those slides, Vicki, but I'm sort of curious to see how you've responded in your own.
Yeah, and I think an important thing is if our viewers, if our members take a deeper dive into these research reports, they'll find that these are just averages, right? So like when you see 51 times, I think that's what the number was on the previous slide. There are some kids that are in like the 600, range. And the same thing with minutes. 43 minutes is the average, but there were some kids that were coming out with, I don't know how many minutes, right? I mean, this is just the average. So when we take a closer look at the range of these numbers, some of it can be very alarming. And if that's your kid, finding out that they might be not on their phones 43 minutes of a school day, but maybe the entire 5 or 6 hours that they're in class, that's pretty upsetting. So
yeah, I agree on so many levels. I do want to point out the point to all this. Let me just share the final sort of piece of insight that we shared in our research, and that is the amount of notifications our kids were receiving on any given day. And so I think this is both a real concern, but also a real opportunity with knowing two things about social media as well as devices in general. And that is our kids being inundated with both messages, notifications, emails, responses to apps. And I think it's important to note in each of the 3 slides that we presented how much of a distraction these devices actually can be and how much they prevent our students from learning or engaging in these spaces. Now, if I were you and I'm listening into this call today, what I would really turn to and I would really look at from this first body of research is the need for us to assess how much time our kids are being distracted and being taken away from what's important in your school setting. And so if that is an interest to you as you think about developing a plan for addressing social media with your families, being very clear about where those distractions are for families and assessing the needs that your families might have in this case. Can you move on to the next slide? And that is the work coming out of work that we did earlier in this year. And that is that recognizing that both social media has its upside and its pitfalls as it relates to our youth mental health. And so the next body of research that we want to share is what exactly is social media doing to, and how is it actually correlated to what our students actually need as they develop into young adults. Can you move on to the next slide just so we have, oh, this is a great one. Thanks, Vicki. I think it's really important to sort of note that our teens, according to the research, they weren't always aware of their amount of consumption, right? That we know for a fact that about 40%, a little under, say that social media has actually reduced their attention span. That also tells me that roughly about 60% don't recognize that, right? That is a very red flag for me. And I certainly don't want to be have an alarmist tone, but I think when we think about learning, when we think about how our families can support learning at home, being aware of where that attention is actually going is very real. And I think the last bit of insight that we share from this research is that a little under 34% of our teens suggested that social media does get in the way of sleep. And here, as a part of a community, what I encourage you to think about is the alignment to sleep and other things like absenteeism or being late or truant in schools. And so if you are working directly with your families, a whole campaign of how our kids are getting to sleep, what our kids are doing prior to going to sleep can be really beneficial for your school community. And again, we don't want to marginalize and we don't want to demonize what our kids are doing online before they fall asleep. We just want to encourage our families to have routines in their place. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I just want to make sure we are aware of that. So, Vicki, I know sleep is very important to you in terms of that, but as you think about the impact sleep has had, not only with your families, but in the schools that you work with, what are some of the recommendations that you've shared, or what are some of the insights that you've shared to alleviate some of these stressors?
Yeah, and it has to be kind of like a whole family buy-in situation. I was not that successful with my kids. They tried telling me that, like when I would say we need to charge our phones, like that's a really good strategy, right? We need to charge our phones in a common area, but I need it to wake up. So then I finally said, well, okay, I'll buy you an old-fashioned alarm clock. And then that was that. So being really intentional about how we're going to use those devices and our behavior around those devices. So things like not taking their phone into their bedroom at night, having that conversation, but being really honest with kids and letting them know that you're coming from a place of concern, that you do empathize with them, but there's a time to visit and there's a time to sleep, and just sharing with them that the effects of lack of sleep can trickle down into their grades. It can trickle down into their sports. Like if they're in sports, their sports performance, it could even trickle down into their relationships. So the more kids know, I think the more, agency they're going to have over that. And they're going to feel empowered by making these decisions for themselves. Now
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So these kids are older and they should be older to be on social media. So by this point, they should be able to have these conversations with their parents and understand the whole point on keeping these things in check. But as parents, making it like a whole family, effort.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You share so many good points, Vicki. I wish I can give you a high five in real life, but I admire that. Yeah. I do want to point out that if you are on the call today, or if you're listening in, that if your exposure to families directly is that the cadence and how often you see them is very limited in scope, meaning you don't see your families that often during the year, a really great way to introduce research to them is just to share insights. This could be in the form of your monthly tip letters that you share out with families. This could be in ensuring that your colleagues all have the same narrative when you talk about social media's impact on youth and mental health. The idea is not for you to inundate your families with all this research, but to let them know the why behind what you're doing with your initiatives. And I think that's key and both critical, right? That families that are not informed will often rely on their peers or even social media to get insights into what they can do about misuse around social media. So again, it's really important to note and to pull out some of the research as you think about supporting your families in this way. Let me continue with a few, and I'll summarize the next few slides here. The big part when we address social media, what we've sort of seen is that the research that we've done is a little over 50% of our teens feel like they always need to show the best versions of themselves. Now, at the surface, this is really great, right? To hear that students want to promote who they are online. They want to promote who they really are for their peers. This is a double-edged sword, though, right? Because this can also work against them, that if I'm curating my persona, my identity so much that it often takes me away from being authentic with my peers or being exposed to content that is maybe not authentic to who I really am. And I think it's important to note here as we think about research and the impact social media has on mental health is to note where our students can actually get information if they feel like they're presenting a persona online that is not themselves, right? Being clear with families how to support your child at home to talk through what those deficiencies are. And I know there's a lot of questions often that I get asked, which is, Jamie, how can I actually tell how many accounts my child has on social media? And we'll get to that in a second, but I think part of solving that is ensuring that your child has an outlet for them to speak about their experiences to begin with. And part of, and the impetus for all this, or the foundation for all this, is ensuring the reality of how students and how kids and how families are using social media to begin with. So it does work hand in hand. All right. And as we sort of pointed out, really, we're seeing that both social media can be helpful and also very harmful. Again, I don't want to go through this, but I do want to point out the last bullet point, which is about 64% of our young adults or young people with moderate or severe depressive symptoms indicate that when they've used social media, they actually feel that others live lives that are much better than them. There's a lot of social comparison that are going on. Let me close with what all this does for our young adults, and I'll close with the latest research that I think is really important and impactful into drawing a narrative for how to support our young adults in this. And so our final research around unpacking the grind culture in America, what we get a sense is that young people from very diverse different groups, they are both sharing their feelings on social media and overall mental health. And what we find is that at some point, you can move on to the next slide if you don't mind. At some point, a majority of these young adults, roughly about 1 in 6, they experience some type of pressure. And these are the pressures that we've outlined. And I want you to just take a moment now to see what those experiences are. And so these are pressures from maintaining their academic achievements, to having a game plan, to ensuring that they have core friends. And if you're looking at this slide and saying, well, this is the same pressure that that was part of my life, just note that all of what is happening is being then magnified in social media spaces. And so I think it's important to kind of know the distinction as you think about what our kids are grappling with and what types of pressure that they are seeing. Can you go on to the next slide? And we want to just point out that one of the more alarming kind of trends that we've seen in young adults as they think about what this burnout or this pressure is, that a quarter of them are struggling with some type of burnout. And so this to me is, I can go on so many sort of levels here, but I'm very curious to kind of hear your perspective around this slide in particular, and what you're seeing, Vicki, when it comes to teens struggling with some type of burnout.
Yeah, I think that there's so much pressure on our teens to have everything just right. You know, we have different types of parenting styles, and now we have different type of teen styles. There are some teens that are very bought into this culture, and there are others who aren't. And so how do we find that balance? Like, how do we find the balance to have a child who is responsible and has, wants to achieve their goals, but then how do we alleviate some of that pressure to be perfect and just like they have to get straight A's, or they have to be the best football player on the team, or they have to have the most friends. So I think it really is about your family values, tapping into those family values and having those conversations with your kids and letting them know it's okay to experience different things and different feelings, but then having some kind of solution to that. If they're feeling a certain way on social media, encouraging them to get off of social media, encouraging them to find a different outlet or a different activity, really paying attention to how kids are feeling and behaving when they are on social media. Again, as a whole family, it takes a family's effort to really guide kids on their social media consumption. And it can be hard for parents too, because at this age, you want to give them a little space, and you don't want to overshadow, but at the same time, they need us still. So it's a kind of like a dance, right? But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you got to, let me know when you want me to send my child there for the next 5 years. You'd be a wonderful parent.
Oh, well, I'm not perfect, but it is that, there's a balance of being their friend and being their parent, and also
Absolutely.
giving them some space and not giving them, everything's like in balance, but it's about
Absolutely.
paying attention. It's about letting them know that they can come to you.
Yeah.
Letting them know that it's okay to have these different feelings, that they're not always going to feel this way, but to find
Yeah.
the solutions on what works best for them.
Absolutely. Let's close off with this research portion. I do want to just close off how all this is tied in. Can you go to the slide before it? How this is all tied in, this pressure is tied into social media. And so one of the wonderful things about our unpacking grind culture research is that nearly about 70% of teens suggested that social media actually increases that pressure to achieve, right? And so it's important to really know and understand the narrative. And what we shared with you thus far, you can go on to the next slide, or 2 slides in front before, one more slide forward if you can.
Forward or
forward if you can. Yeah, it's important to understand these underlying issues. And I want to point to you what you can do both with the research now, but both understand it for yourself as a professional, what it means. We started with this idea that our kids are increasingly being distracted by their devices. And so as a professional working with families, it's important to note those instances in your community, what distraction looks like for your students, for your families, so families can pick up on what those skills are. We'll give you some solutions on what to do in a second. It's important to then understand the other underlying issue, which is there is both a tension that exists of our kids being attacked and having some negative perceptions on their identities, things that we didn't cover in this research, but really important to kind of note that social and mental health are very real when our kids are being exposed to these experiences online. And finally, it's really important to note that one of the issues that social media presents is that there's a pressure that our kids are grappling with, and that social media sometimes exacerbates that pressure. All right, before the world goes to an end, let's go back to the reflection question and actually do something about it now. So here's what I want you to do on the chat. If you are following along or listening on, I want you to reflect on one of 3 questions. And by all means, feel free to share some of your thoughts on the chat. If you're listening afterwards, reflect and consider how you might share some of these questions with your families. The first is, as a professional within your own group, how do these issues that we presented, how do they manifest themselves in your school community? The second is, have you noticed any signs of burnout or anxieties, or any stressors related to social media use amongst your students at your school site? And then finally, if you're at a place where you are giving strategies to families, what have been some of those strategies that have been really helpful for your families as they manage some of these challenges? So there's a lot to consider. Let's take about 30 seconds to chime in on some of your thoughts. And as you do that and we read some of those comments, I'll ask you, Vicki, maybe we'll take one question and see how you might resonate with that.
Oh, okay. I'm going to take 3. So I think it's really important to arm families, parents and caregivers, and I guess other members of the family as well, with strategies that they can use. And so my number 1 advice is to have some kind of plan, right? You got to have a plan on what's going to happen, how you're going to use media and tech and social media, having those expectations, those guidelines, those kind of, those boundaries, starting with conversations. If you need conversation starters, we have those as well. Sometimes it's hard to get into these conversations with kids. I found that the best time to have these conversations was in the car when they didn't have to look at me, and we were stuck in a car. So I always tell parents, like, if you're having trouble having conversations, get in the car and start one then, because they can't get out and they don't have to look at you. And a lot of times they're very honest. So approaching these subjects that way, but having a plan, having a schedule, being aware of where they're spending their time and taking their feelings into consideration, asking them for them to help you make a plan. What else? Jamie, I know you do things even with your little one, because she's going to be there before you know it. So I know you've already thought about this. And what are some things that you share with your teachers and families?
Yeah, absolutely. These are all great questions. And thanks for the question. I want to point to the first one, which is when I work with school communities and parent liaisons, one of the things that I really admire about what they are doing is that they are really mindful about assessing and taking that and having those up-to-date sort of themes that surface for them as families. And I know we'll certainly share a survey link for you all momentarily, but I love the fact that schools that are very in tune to how social media is impacting their kids regularly send families with a very quick survey or a way to an outlet for families to have those conversations. And so if that is part of your school culture, smile on my behalf or drink some extra water, because that's a very refreshing experience on that. Let's
you see some comments in there. Scott says that sometimes chat issues are being had at school and out of school. I know a lot of schools get the parents in there and they want them to help them with things that happen outside of school. So
absolutely, you know, yeah. And it's important, I think, to know, and that's a great theme, and I really appreciate that comment. It's important to note that while social media and issues that happen outside of school don't always affect and shouldn't always affect the school community, we know very much that it does. And so being transparent with families to note how that actually takes place. So if you're an administrative dean, the amount of time it takes for you to investigate a particular chat, if you sense that there's communication going on or the kids are using certain memes in the playground. And so I inspire you for folks that want to differentiate that, to be very transparent about your role in teaching kids those critical thinking skills and ensure and to be transparent about what those boundaries are for families in the place. Wonderful insight. The second, I think, is about parental controls. We get asked this all the time, which is this is vital for parents' support and ensuring that families actually have and are aware of what parental controls are. Here's where I want to both caution us and also invite us to consider where parental controls do fall in the family's life. We do have a resource that we will share as well around parental controls, but I think it's important to note that early on, if you feel as a parent liaison you want to share some parental control resources, to also note what families can do to wean off of that, so you can highlight and demonstrate what agency looks like for that child and those students.
Yeah.
Can we move on to the next slide, just so we can have a broader question?
Yeah, I did want to add something too about parental controls, and this is often what we tell parents and caregivers is the best parental control is you. And that's something that when you are offering guidance on parental controls, you can suggest some, but it's really what they want to measure. And so giving them options and really aligning it to their family values and what their goals are is really important, but also letting them know that it's like any other type of parenting. They're going to be their best parental control. And so having that constant communication and engagement with their kids is really important. Somebody said something about hate groups that is the same, like being aware of what's happening, having those conversations, building empathy with kids from when they're little, because by the time they get on social media, if they don't have that empathy, if they don't have those skills, then it might be, it's going to be harder to reel in. So yeah.
And we've been rattling off these tidbits that you can do. Let's consolidate it into the next section. And so if you're following along, we will now structure kind of what that support and what you can do about this at this point. But before we do, we want to take a break as we are closing into some recommendations. If you have any questions, by all means, feel free to add them onto the chat. This is also your time to make note of any things that you may have liked or disliked about the presentation thus far. So there's a link to the survey that's been added on the chat. By all means, we don't take offense if you didn't like my smile or if you feel like I presented content that you felt is very different. We encourage you to kind of get that insight. So.
Yeah. And so add some questions in case we haven't gone through something yet. We will be doing an interactive activity with you just to help you understand and have empathy for kids and the social pressures that they are feeling. And then we'll follow that up with some strategies on what you can use or what you can help families with. But yeah, giving you just a little extra time to give us some questions and your feedback.
Great.
So one of the questions I know that we often get asked is, how do we help our kids through this? And when it's what happens if you're doing everything right and you still get a kid that is not, receptive to this? What do you do? Anybody have any advice for that, Jamie, or anybody on the call? How can you help kids that are maybe reluctant to this?
Can you rephrase the second part of your question? Reluctant to not
Not taking, not taking all of these points into consideration. They still are very hard to talk with. If kids are reluctant to your suggestions, what do you do? Do you give up, or do you just take the phone away? What do you do? A lot of parents ask these questions. Do I just not let them be on social media?
I think that's a great question. And I think one of the things that have been really helpful in working with schools and school communities is when I see parent liaisons or when I see a school leader actually taking a very specific stance on an issue and having some very clear guidelines of what to do when that issue goes sour are very beneficial, right? I was recently working with a school district that said, we believe that as your child ages, they will be exposed to certain content online. And here as a school community, here's what we're going to be doing to support you as a parent. And here is what we recommend that you do as a parent to support your child. And I do think families are really in need, like many of us as adults, to not only model for our child what's right and what's wrong, but to share some of those skills that you've outlined. And so I think it's important, again, have a vision as a school leader or as a parent liaison or in your role to think about what is healthy in your school community. And then you can provide outlets for them, resources, talking points, things that common sense does offer.
Yeah.
And, that's a great question, though. It is very challenging, right? Because of what we pointed out, the level of impulsivity and distraction that research tells us about what our kids are going through online. So.
And then I have another one. Let's see. How can educators encourage parents to take an active role in monitoring and guiding their kids' social media use without overstepping boundaries? We hear a lot about parental choice. And so lots of times parents and family engagement specialists, they want to be really careful on, they feel like maybe they're judging parents, right? So how do you encourage them to take a more active role? Like if they notice their kids are not using social media appropriately, or they're participating in, inappropriate behavior, how do you broach the subject with parents without overstepping and making them feel like they're a bad parent?
That's a great question, and I think it would be very helpful to distinguish between a parent's feeling about something and the need as educators to highlight skills that ensure that a child is healthy in online spaces. And so I think for families, the support that is that might be very beneficial is making sure that you explain to families the why, right? This is what we attempted to model for you all this morning or this afternoon, which is research is telling us that this is what is problematic when your child is exposed to social media. And here's how we want to support you. That level of clarity is often masked with how parents will receive that information. I think parents are very eager and very willing to take not only advice, but to share some resources when they feel that the child is using or misusing technology. I often like to point out that you as a school leader or as an educator it's perfectly okay to say it's time to reset, because these are some of the qualities that are impacting learning in our classroom, and this is what you can do with social media. So, I would just invite and challenge and inspire and hopefully encourage, I should say, educators in schools to reconsider that stance to provide families a little bit more agencies to talk to their kids.
Thank you, Jamie. Those are all wonderful, wonderful suggestions. So we're going to have you we're going to have us participate in this activity. And what I'd like you to do is take out your cell phones and turn on your sound for all notifications. So whether it's text messaging or email notifications, take a few seconds there to enable all of those notifications. And then I'd like you to take this social media quiz. And Lisa, I think, is going to put that link in the chat. This is a strategy you can use with your families to get them thinking about about social media use with their kids. So take a few minutes and see if you get any notifications. I told Jamie, this will be the one time I get no notifications. So a lot of times if I don't silence my notifications and I'm doing work, I get distracted. And that's what's happening to our kids. So this activity is to help families build that empathy. Somebody mentioned having empathy for their kids. And a lot of times as parents, we just want the best for our kids and we forget how they may be feeling. And so coming from a place of empathy will go a long way. And so giving this activity to your families is a good place to start before they have these conversations so that they understand their kids a little more. So see if you can take this quiz without any notifications going off. Again, my notifications always go on. And what did I tell you, Jamie? I said, they're not going to go on anymore. I have no notifications. Do you have any notifications? Did you enable yours?
I did. And I'm probably on the opposite spectrum that I delete so much things in my life that notifications that I should be receiving from my mother or even my family often go unnoticed. So I'm probably
we're not
example.
Right. So we can just assume that they're getting constant notifications according to our research and our experiences as parents. So the point is to do something, whether it's this activity or something else. When you're getting notifications, it can cause stress. It can cause distractions. So if you are on the call and you are taking this quiz and you have been getting notifications, please share in the chat how it made you feel. Did you feel distracted? Did you feel stressed out? And then if you have any strategies to reduce those notifications and set those boundaries, let us know. I know we have our own strategies, and a lot of it goes back to settings and controls. But this is just another way we can engage our families. When we talk about connecting with them, when we talk about collaborating and leading alongside them, you can share tools with them, just like this social media quiz. Anybody have anything to add? If not, we will go on.
I've seen this experiment happen a number of times in the classroom, and I think it's might be helpful as just to highlight that, where math, a teacher in math, for example, will highlight how many notifications a child received throughout the week, and then they've created some type of analysis around that. I found that to be interesting. I found something similar, not around notifications, but social media content, where a teacher was asking kids to document how long they can stay on any given video that they might be watching. And so this can be used as a learning opportunity as well. I absolutely love this activity. So
yeah, I think is it pretty new, because I had not seen it until a few weeks ago. So like we have so many things on our website, and that's why it's so great to belong to our program, because we can curate these for you. So I'm happy to be able to do that for you all. But yeah, Katrina says that she feels frustrated anytime she gets a notification turned on. And they designed these features, intentionally to have those alarms going off. They're red, right? They're noisy. So yeah, it gives us that sense of urgency. In the 80s, when I didn't have a cell phone and I was in high school, I know I'm aging myself at this point, but anyway, I'm okay. I'm proud of it. If somebody called you and you weren't there, they had to wait until you got home and listen to your answering machine. You weren't constantly available. And so right now, when the phone goes off, you can be in the middle of a conversation and you feel like you have to respond, like you have to get that call. They want you online. These companies want you connected. They want you using their devices. So yeah, and sorry about the survey if it's duplicated. We'll get that fixed. I saw that also. But yeah, any other? Let me see. Somebody said frustrated. How many else? How many others? How many others are responding? Let's see. Scott says, I have my notifications turned off or at least silenced. He says it's so frustrating when I'm working on a project or helping someone with an issue. Yeah. And think about what it does to our relationships. I don't know, Jamie, when you go out to dinner with your partner, do if she gets a phone call or something, or if you get a phone call or a text, do you look at your phone? Do you silence the notifications? Are you always aware of that? Or do you forget sometimes? And what happens if you do forget? Do you look at it?
Yeah, I think, there's definitely moments where we have to put it away, right? And I think, as we apply it back into schools, what we're ultimately trying to do with families is to say, you need to model the behaviors that you want your child to be seeing, and this is a really great activity to do that. So if there are moments where you can recommend things like when you're out to dinner or when you're out having conversations at home, or if there's a no cell phone use, 3 little bullet point tips can go a really long way.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not the best at it though. I mean, I have to admit, right, that sometimes I do receive a message, or I think my 9-year-old sort of says it best. She says, "How can you work for an organization where you are doing the opposite?" And so I have to look at myself in the mirror in that sense and
Ooh,
recognize
she's a
that.
little sassy girl.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, but
That's good, though. She knows the boundaries and she's learning that young. So good for you. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, I know that if my husband gets a call and he answers it, I can get a little irritated. So now what we've decided that if we are going to get a phone call or a text and we are going to respond to it, that we tell the person who we're with, I'm sorry, I really have to get this. I've been waiting for this phone call from my boss or my doctor. I'm so sorry. Can you please excuse me? Because the more people know, then the better they're going to be able to understand us. Because a lot of times feelings can get hurt, and that's when phones and devices can get in the way of your relationship. So it's okay to take those calls if you need to, or look at your texts. But that, like I said, communication is one of the best strategies that you can use, because there are going to be times where you have to have your phone right there.
yeah,
And you might have to get out of jail, because who said something about jail? Kim says, we've started a phone jail. And I love it. But there are going to be those times. So you could say, I need a get out of jail pass tonight because my
yeah.
boss is supposed to call me. But these are all really great
Let me
ideas.
just, can I quickly just add the last piece, which is, as a school community, if you're trying to scale this, just highlighting how that works, that what a phone jail looks like does go a long way, right? Like communicating to families in your parent newsletter. This week is parent phone jail week. If you have a moment, take about 30 minutes to do that. These are all real subtle tips that often just go overlooked in their place. It does lead us to this next slide, and I just want to close. I want to be mindful of my amount of recommendations that I've shared so far. I do believe that this document that you're sharing out now, the Family Tech Planner, is probably one of the more foundational documents that you can use as a school community to ensure that everyone is on the same page. And so when I present a document like the Family Tech Planner, what I often hear families say is, we already have rules at home, and then they proceed to tell me how much time or how little time or how much controls that they have for their child to mitigate and monitor cell phone use. In this case, why we're presenting this document is because it gives you a chance to have conversations with your child about their social media use in this case. And so we want to make sure that we're creating those expectations. And so what I would do with a document like this is, once you distribute it, fill it out yourself as a school leader or as a parent liaison. If you are an educator, say, this is the way I model some social media use in my house, whether that's YouTube or Minecraft. And we want to have those conversations with our kids, how much time is being spent, but more importantly, what should be the expectations around communicating, what values are inherent in the document that regularly need to be updated. And this is not a rule document. This is not just, here it is, and we're going to post this on the refrigerator. This is a living document that should change with the trust and the engagement that your child has in their space. And I want to go back to really quickly what you shared at the very beginning with, sometimes our kids aren't ready for this. And this is a time that we as professionals have to also recommend that if a child is not ready for expectations, they might not be ready to be present in social media spaces, right? We want to draw that distinction, or draw that line for families to give them that agency to talk to their kids in that space.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
really, really great document that I encourage you to
Yeah.
iterate and modify as you see fit with social media.
Right. And as our colleague on the chat said, Lisa, I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce Lisa, but she's amazing. And she leads our Connected Schools program. And she says they are created for different ages and stages as well. And so they're good for all ages, and they're relevant because they're a little different from each age group. But thank you, Jamie. This is a really great place to start. And as Lisa said, it creates another way to have that conversation. So it's a great conversation starter. One other resource that we have, and it is being updated. So keep checking back because it is currently being refreshed. And so I want you to have the latest and greatest version of this. So, but this is a parent's ultimate guide. And so we have these on different things. We have these on social media, parental controls, etc. We have them on different gaming apps, for example. But check back because they are being refreshed. I think the parental control one right now is currently being refreshed, but we have others. And so just keep checking back this year as we are having a big refresh on these. But parents love these. So make sure to share these with parents. And it's just like a little guide for them. And give them some quick tips, some strategies, some resources they can look into to help them with these conversations and with these guidelines. And then the next one, Jamie.
Great. I think the final piece that I'll just share is oftentimes we as educators want to share apps or resources that can be very tangible to families. And one of the ways to help to address and mitigate social or mental health sort of issues associated with social media misuse is maybe providing students with an alternative apps that might actually help with that mindfulness. And so what we've outlined for you is a list of apps that reinforce mindfulness, reinforce this essence of slowing down and feeling connected with oneself. I encourage you to take a look at that. One of the great ways that you can do this is I know that the holidays are coming up. And so this might be a great resource to share with families as they're going to be engaged in healthy media consumption. Say, maybe you want a meditation before kids are actually getting dinner, or maybe this is a transition document. There's some really, really great resources that include things like podcasts. They include a number of apps that actually can help your child or help kids think broadly about building sort of things like resiliency and mindfulness around that. So,
and Lisa and Jamie, we are also able to filter by age, correct?
Mm-hmm.
We're looking for like our best of lists. So whether you're looking for, 2 to 5 years old or 5 to 10 years old or whatnot, you can go on there and it'll preschool or elementary. I don't know how they're divided, but I know you can filter by age. So
absolutely, yeah. One of my favorites that I've been using, just and again, this is not highlighted. I just like when I went to this list and I shared this with school communities, is an app called the Mood Meter. This is a really great tool. We review it on our site, and I think it's well reviewed. And it is an actual tool that actually helps young kids promote sort of self-awareness, like where they're at in their particular spaces. So there's so many great resources on that link that we've curated for you. So feel free to take a look at that and see how it is that we've reviewed the app itself, and hopefully you can copy and paste or share that out with your school communities as well, your families.
You bring up a good point about recommending the best meditation and mindfulness apps when we're talking about social media and the effects that it has on their social and emotional and mental health. One thing that parents do a lot is when their kids are struggling, their first line of defense is to take the phone away. But we also found that many kids are using their phones and social media to get help. So again, going back to that conversation and asking them what they're using it for, because if they are using it to get help, whether they're using a mindfulness app or, like I use Calm, right? When I'm feeling a little anxious. So if they're using these apps to help themselves, we need to know that as parents. So asking parents, what can be done in this situation if your kid is using the phone and you're afraid that they're going to be exposed to more danger, right? Or more those negative effects. How can we use it to positively help them? Maybe we use it with them, but we allow them to still access what they need to access, or maybe they use it in a common area so that we know what's happening. But that's something to think about. I had never thought about that. My first line of defense was always to take it away. That was just me. My kids are older now. They're both adults. But I never really thought of that. I never thought, like, maybe having that connection with their best friend is the only way they're going to have connection with them, because they live so far apart. My friends used to live in the same neighborhood, but kids live all over now and they go to the same school. And so if they can't have access to their friends, maybe the only time they have access is on social media or with their phone. So really, consulting and giving that kind of advice to parents too is really important, to be more thoughtful. And I really love that you shared this resource. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. And so just the last thing I just want to remind you all about is, when we say leading along families, again, it's so important that you're here today. We have 2 more professional developments coming up. And we have 2 more parent talks coming up. So always stay aware of those. But I want you to really get the most out of this program. So please, please don't forget, you have that hub of resources. You have, again, these sessions that you can attend. If you're not able to attend live, you can go back and watch the recordings. If you watch the recordings, shoot me an email and let me know what you thought about it or what you learned. If you have any suggestions for future PDs or parent talks, I'd love to hear that as well. You can also share those monthly curated resources with your families. In fact, today, you should have all received the November curated email with all of our content for November. And the topic of the month was parental controls. Speaking of that, we're going to have office hours next month with one of our cohort members, and also be more active in the Slack channel. I feel that nobody's being active in the Slack channel. So I'd love to hear your advice for us as well. Any kind of best practices that you're using, any resources that are helping you, feel free to share those in the Slack channel. But I want you to know that our upcoming office hours are December 4th at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. And we are going to have Dan Beck, and he is one of our cohort members, and he is a tech expert, and he is going to be presenting on parental controls. So if you're anything like me and can talk about parental controls, but sometimes have a hard time, figuring them out or just loading them onto a device, feel free to come and get some tips on how you can help families do the same. Because a lot of times families will come to you and say, I don't know how to even set up my phone. I don't know how to set up their device. I don't know how to monitor their phone. Like, which is the best app? So if you have any of those kind of questions and you want to improve your knowledge when it comes to parental control, so that then you can then share that with your families, feel free. We'd love to have you there. And again, you can find that information in our hub. And I will also link the Zoom link again in our Slack channel. We have the dates for our upcoming parent webinars and our professional development sessions, so please note those on your calendar. We don't have the topics yet because we are waiting for your feedback. We just, I think it just went out this week. It might come out at the end of this week. I'm not sure, but you should be receiving our quarterly survey. And in that quarterly survey are questions about what you need, what you want. So for the remaining 2 parent talks and the remaining 2 professional development sessions, we want to hear from you on what you want to do, on what you want to hear. So please look out for that. I'm pretty sure we have a chance for you to win a gift card. I think we have some Starbucks gift cards out there. And I remember being a teacher, and I didn't care if it was a $5 gift card or $20 gift card. I just wanted a free cup of coffee. So we know that part of this program is asking you for this survey, but we did want to reward you as well. So you might be one of our lucky winners. And as always, we're here to help you. We're here. Reach out whenever you need to. Again, you can email me directly. You can Slack message me. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find Jamie on LinkedIn. If you need to talk to Jamie, let me know and I can connect you with him. And if you don't have digital citizenship, if your school is not implementing the digital citizenship curriculum, please let me know. Please talk to those in charge of that, and then I can connect those people with Jamie as well. He does a fantastic job. We know it's a whole community effort, so we want this whole community approach to also support you and your department. So we need teachers, we need families, we need administrators, counselors, social workers, community members, you name it, and we can help, and Jamie can help as well. And if you are anybody on a private school, or you know somebody who is in a private or independent school, Lisa, who is our chat moderator, she leads our Connected Schools program, and you can find information about that on our website as well. I want to thank Jamie and Lisa, and I want to thank Jordan, our video man. He's our video champ and expert running this show. I want to say thank you to them. So please help me extend a big thank you to all of them as well. And I wish you the happiest of holidays. I hope to see you at office hours. If not, happy holidays, and we will reconvene in next year for our next professional development in Parent Talk. Have a wonderful day, and thank you